The Buccaneers continue to get high praise coming out of the NFL draft. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Jason Light had some interesting comments on the Pat McAfee show as well as the Rich Eisen show. We're going to get into that a little bit more coming up in a bit. But let's start things off with some more reaction to what Light and his team did in the NFL draft. So outside of CBS Sports, NBC Sports, and Bleacher Report, all giving the Buccaneers an A for what they did in the draft, Monday Morning Quarterback had something interesting to say. So Matt Verderame of Monday Morning Quarterback and Sports Illustrated named the top 5 most improved teams in the NFL after the draft. The Cleveland Browns were number 5, but it had more to do with the players they added before Shedeur Sanders rather than Shedeur himself, which is why old Mel Kiper, of course, gave them an A+ in his grades. But then Verderame named the Patriots at 4, Cowboys at 3, Steelers at 2, and his number 1 most improved team was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Verderame said, quote, "The Buccaneers surprised many around the league when they took a receiver with the number 19 overall pick, selecting Ohio State's Emeka Egbuka. Still, Egbuka is a talented prospect who should thrive under the tutelage of fellow wideouts Mike Evans and Chris Godwin before taking over one of their roles." Later on, general manager Jason Light found talent in second-day corners Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish, both of whom could start with strong training camps in a revamped secondary. To start day 3, Light selected a pair of defensive linemen in David Walker and Elijah Roberts, giving Tampa Bay some reinforcements up front. Ultimately, the Buccaneers left the draft as one of the most improved teams, end quote. When you take a look at what the Buccaneers did, you can easily make the argument that not only are they one of the most improved teams, but you can also make the case that they have planted themselves firmly in the conversation as one of the best teams in at least the NFC. You take into account the additions of Hassan Reddick to improve the pass rush. You bring in Anthony Walker as linebacker depth, the return of Bryce Hall as cornerback depth. You have Deion Jones, a linebacker, with a full offseason under his belt. Then you go out and you add a world-class receiver, 2 starting caliber corners, another edge rusher, a rotational guy along the defensive line, and the cherry on top is someone to come in and actually help your special teams. The team got better in all 3 phases of the game. Across the board, the Buccaneers got better. We didn't even talk about the addition of Riley Dixon to help stabilize punter, or Desmond Watson having a chance to add to the defensive line rotation, Shiloh Sanders getting a chance to add to the safety depth, or John Bullock coming out of Nebraska with a chance to be part of the linebacker room. This team, if healthy, can stand up against the likes of the Eagles, the Lions, and the Commanders in the NFC. Then they can go toe-to-toe with the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Bills in the AFC. This is a team that has every chance to win 12 or 13 games, regardless of who is on their schedule, and that schedule is not easy. Let me tell you, we're going to talk more about the schedule in the coming days as we prepare for the schedule release, but a schedule for a division winner is never easy because now you have to go up against the division winners from the previous season. But the key is staying healthy. Some of that, most of that, is going to be beyond their control. But I'll tell you this, they'll be damned if injuries are going to derail their season the way that they did last year. Across the board, you have the depth that you need. Across the board, you have starting caliber players that can step in at any moment and play to the level of the person in front of them, or at least close to it. Sterling Shepard could not fill the void of Chris Godwin going down, but Emeka Egbuka can. That's why they took him, because he's a wide receiver 2 in the NFL, and on their roster, he's starting as the wide receiver 4. But they know that he can be a weapon for them as a role player, or he can step into a starting role. Either way, he's going to help. Tyreek Thunderbrook couldn't fill the void of Jamel Dean's injuries, but Benjamin Morrison can if he doesn't outright win the starting job in training camp. Tyke Smith was an absolute baller at nickel last year, but he's going back to safety. Christian Izien is outstanding in that role as the nickel corner, but if either of them go down, you have Parrish waiting in the wings to step up. Jason Light and his staff have done an absolutely tremendous job of building this roster into a contender now while keeping their eyes on the horizon. Mike Evans is entering a contract year, no telling how much longer he's going to be playing. Maybe 1 or 2 more seasons, we don't know, but he has now reached that Levante David status where he's year to year. Chris Godwin signed a 3-year deal, but no telling how much longer he'll play beyond that. Levante David, this is probably it for him. Jamel Dean is in a contract year. He's not going to be back. His replacement was just drafted with the 53rd overall pick. Zion McCollum is in a contract year. The Buccaneers have 43 players that are set to be free agents next year. I'm not going to list all of them, but there are a lot of very significant names. Jason Light and Mike Greenberg already started the process of clearing cap to roll over for all of these deals. There are some that are going to get done throughout the summer and into training camp to get those guys extended and locked up. But you have Reddick on a 1-year deal. Shep is probably done after this season with all of the receivers that the Bucs have brought in. Gedeke, Otten, Izien, Tucker, Keat. These are all guys set to hit free agency. So their window is open now to compete for a championship with the work that they've already put in, but they still have a lot to plan for the future if they want to stay in contention and stay atop the division and among the ranks of the rest of the playoff teams. So Matt Verderame heaps the praise on them, talks about how, he is, or the Bucs are the best or one of the most improved teams coming out of the NFL draft. But it's not just about 2025. You have to look to 2026 and beyond when you are talking about what the Bucs are doing, what they are setting up for, what the long-term plan is for this franchise. Jason Light has been with this team for over a decade. He's been through ups and downs. You have seen terrible seasons. You have seen close seasons. You have seen a Super Bowl season. But you can't just look at things for this year in a vacuum. You have to continue to look to the future, and that's what Jason Light and his scouts and his team have done a great job of, preparing this team in this draft for not just 2025, but all the way until 2030. Jason Light was making his rounds on Wednesday and had some pretty interesting things to say. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller and subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you are ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. It's a game changer for me with all the travel we do for my son's hockey. We can plug a Fire TV Sticks 4K into the TV so that he can unwind after his games, or so he and his teammates can run an NHL tournament right from the comfort of their rooms. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Jason Licht was making his rounds on Wednesday, appearing on both the Pat McAfee show and Rich Eisen show. But I'm going to start with the Pat McAfee show when Jason started talking about their draft and the way they organize their draft board, which I found to be pretty interesting. Light said, quote, "It's really not that hard. We put players that are worthy of being drafted on the board like every team does. But then we just kind of take the A-holes and the D-bags off, and the guys that don't love football and the guys that have proven that they don't like it, that are difficult to deal with, and we just kind of mitigate our risk. We're taking great players that are great humans," end quote. I think this is a huge reason that players like James Pierce and Mike Green, both of which I talked about a lot on this show as potential fits for the Bucs, I don't think they were on the Bucs draft board at all. I spent a lot of time talking about how when you draft a player that has some character concerns, you have to have a culture in a locker room that can absorb that while having the leadership to try and course correct whatever those problems are. Instead, the Bucs, mode of operation here is that they just don't even consider those guys. Along the same lines, when talking about Benjamin Morrison, Light said that their doctors do thorough checks on these players and they trust the evaluations of those doctors. And they listen to what those doctors tell them, that if a player is going to be all right, or on the flip side, if there are legit concerns surrounding their medical evaluations. I believe this is why Jahad Campbell wasn't on their draft board either. This was the guy coming off of shoulder surgery, and the word circulating now is that he's going to have to get surgery on his other shoulder after his rookie season. The Buccaneers have changed the culture inside their locker room and their facility over the course of the last few years. I think some of that has to do with the arrival of Tom Brady, but I think a lot of it has to do with Jason Licht and his evaluators turning the tables and evaluating themselves. They have missed on characters, not players. Licht said that himself on McAfee, that they haven't missed on players, they've missed on people. Go back to some of those early drafts. Noah Spence, not a great character guy. Devin White, not a great character guy. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, not a great character guy. Recently, over the past few years, the Bucs have focused on drafting high character guys, locker room leaders, team captains, and that has made a huge difference in what they've been able to accomplish. After Antonio Brown, which was a Brady request more than anything, they haven't brought in anyone that would be the kind of player that's going to ruffle feathers or create problems. If they did, those players were gone quickly once it was realized. You could argue that was part of the reason that Jordan Whitehead wasn't back this year. I think that played into it, the at-fault car accident that cost him the end of the season. But I believe that decision was more performance-based than anything else. He didn't produce on the field. They aren't going to keep someone that isn't producing. Regardless of what their character is, if you're not producing on the field, you're not going to be on the roster. This is why no one has had more success in recent years in the draft than Jason Licht and his staff. Every draft pick that he's made in the first 6 rounds since 2019 were on NFL rosters last season. No team has more players taken in the first 5 rounds since 2014 that have played more games or more snaps than those drafted by the Buccaneers. This is why the Buccaneers are going to operate moving forward the way that they are now. So they want great players that are great people. Those are the players that they're going to evaluate, that they're going to leave on their draft board, and they are going to select on draft nights. So the next time that I'm talking about draft prospects and I start talking about a guy that has a couple of red flags, I need to remind myself of these interviews that Jason Licht is giving, because when it comes time to sign free agents, they aren't going to sign guys that are problems on or off the field. I've seen some say that Reddick was a problem last year, but the truth is he wasn't. There were problems created by the Jets and miscommunications or maybe some false promises, but that wasn't a Reddick problem. That was a Jets problem. That's why he's in Tampa. He can produce. He's a likable guy inside the building. He's a leader. He's not a problem character player. It means something to be a Buccaneer man. Jason Licht said that, painted on the wall inside the building is a silhouette of Lavonte David, and written on that silhouette are the core values that they look for in players. And at the very end, it says, "I am that man." That phrase is more than just being a football player. It's more than just empty words written on a wall. It's about how these guys conduct themselves, how they represent their teammates, how they represent the franchise, how they represent their family on and off the field. Those are the guys that the Buccaneers want in their building. Those are the guys that they want to build the future of the franchise with. So when he talks about laying out his draft board with all the players that are worth being drafted, and then they go through and they start erasing them. If they're a-holes, if they're D-bags, Jason Licht's words, not mine, and I'm still editing it for family consumption. They eliminate those problem guys. They're not even in consideration because they've already seen enough, and they know that those are not Buccaneers. They are not that man. That's why you draft Emeka Egbuka. That's why you draft Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish and David Walker. That's why going back, you drafted Antoine Winfield Jr. and Kalijah Cansey, Graham Barton, Bucky Irving, all of these guys. They fit the mold of what Jason Licht and the rest of his staff have deemed Buccaneer men. So if I forget myself and I start talking about, this prospect or that prospect that, he's got this red flag where this thing happened, just cut me off. Send me a DM, text me if you're an insider, and just say, "Hey, James, did you forget last year the whole thing about how Jason Licht and the Bucs eliminate the a-holes and the D-bags?" And I'll come on and I'll say, "I'm sorry. I did forget. I'm an old man. I have a short memory." So I absolutely loved that from Jason Licht on the Pat McAfee show. But there was more fun insight from Jason on the Rich Eisen show. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. I apologize. I'm starting to get a cold. I can't breathe out of my nose. My throat's scratchy, so I apologize if I sound funny or I'm a little short-winded. But after his appearance on the Pat McAfee show, Jason Licht stopped by the Rich Eisen show to discuss the draft and where the Buccaneers stand as of now. Of course, Rich Eisen had to give Jason Licht grief for drafting an Ohio State player in the first round. Eisen, a proud Michigan alum. So he was having a little back and forth with Jason about that. If you haven't listened to Jason Licht's appearance on the Rich Eisen show, I highly suggest you do. It's pretty hilarious. Jason Licht's a funny dude, and he and Rich were going back and forth. It was really entertaining. But where the Bucs stand right now is the division champions for 4 consecutive years. They stand as, the only team outside of the Chiefs to make the playoffs every season for the last 5 years. And Eisen asked Light about his draft approach and whether or not he takes the rest of the NFC South into consideration when going through the draft and selecting their players or going through free agency, working on improving the team. Does that weigh on his mind when he's selecting these players to join the team? And Light said, quote, "Well, I think we'll never take any team in our division lightly. We've got a good rivalry going with all of them, and it doesn't matter what the record is at any given time with any of these teams. We're never going to take them lightly." That's just the best way to say it. So I don't care who you're going against. You need to be able to rush the passer. You need to be able to score points. You want to be able to cover so you can take that, so you take them into account. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. These are premium positions. No matter what division you're in, quarterback, pass rush, offensive line, defensive line, corner. So I think it would be the same, to be honest with you, no matter what division we're in. End quote. Let's look at that division for a moment, because at the end of the day, the easiest way to get into the playoffs is to win your division. So you look at the position groups from top to bottom, and you're going to be hard pressed to find many position groups where the Bucs are not currently the best in the NFC South. Quarterback, without question, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield is light years ahead of every other quarterback in the division as it stands right now in May of 2025. Offensive line, wide receiver, it's still the Bucs. The Bucs have the best receiver room in the entire NFL, let alone in the NFC South. Tight end, the Bucs are probably second in terms of talent, but the Falcons never seem to use Kyle Pitts correctly. So production-wise, the Bucs are probably at the top of that position group in the division. The only place on offense where the Bucs come in second, in my opinion, is running back. I love Bucky. You love Bucky. But Bijan Robinson is different. And I'm not going to disrespect him for the sake of how much I love watching Bucky Irving play football. Bijan Robinson is one of the best running backs in the NFL. So the Falcons have that position in terms of, power ranking the NFC South based on positions. Defensively, as of now, is where things are a little questionable. I think defensive line, the Bucs are in the conversation for first. They're probably atop the division when you look at the front. Vita, Cansey, Hall, Roberts now. You bring back Greg Gaines. They have a solid front rotation. Edge rusher, I think they're second. I put the Falcons at first, but with the addition of Reddick and Walker, I expect a lot more production out of that group this season. Cornerback, you're probably still second, depending on what you get out of Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish in training camp into the beginning of the season, where they fit in, if they win those jobs. When Jamel Dean is healthy, he's solid and reliable. McCollum last year was good. He needs to take another step forward. I think he does. And, full disclosure, I think he takes another step forward because he's taken at least one step, if not a massive leap forward every year of his career. Eisen, he can hold it down at nickel. I'm not worried there. So the question is Benjamin Morrison going to beat out Jamel Dean for the starting job? And now, although he's expensive, you have an incredible depth piece at outside corner in case of injury. Where does Jacob Parrish fit into this? Is he going to beat out Eisen for the starting nickel job, which just provides more depth if he does at the safety position as well as the quarterback position, with Eisen being able to bounce all over the place? Safety, I think the Bucs are second behind the Falcons. Again, I think the Falcons probably have the best secondary in the division. Antoine is the best safety in the division and arguably the best in the league if he's healthy. Tyke, we're going to see what happens there. We're going to see how he does moving from nickel to safety. I still prefer him at nickel, but this is Todd Bowles' defense. He's a better talent evaluator than I am. If he says Tyke's going to be the starting safety, I trust it. Linebacker is where things get really, really dicey. Levante's Levante. He is what he is. How the rest of the rotation is going to work out with Anthony Walker, Servassier Dennis, Deion Jones, Antonio Greer, can this group live up to what Bowles needs from them in order to succeed? because right now I think they're behind the Saints at least, and probably the Panthers too. This is what has plenty of Bucs fans nervous, and it's for good reason. It is the linebacker position is the single biggest unknown on this team. And I'm going to talk more about it on my next episode when we dive into the mailbag. But that was the concern heading into free agency in the draft. That's why I was so high on Jahad Campbell. I had other inside linebackers in the draft that I really liked. It's why I dedicated one of these episodes over a month ago to whether or not the Bucs should try to orchestrate a trade with Cincinnati to get Pratt when he expressed interest in getting out of Cincinnati. Maybe that's still in the cards because of the way the Bengals handled the linebacker position in the draft. But we don't know what Servassier Dennis and Anthony Walker are going to be able to do. We don't know how Servassier is going to be able to hold up following the surgery that he needed and had been putting off. He hasn't been available as much as the Bucs have needed him to, but is he still just a situational player? Is Anthony Walker going to be the starter with Servassier rotating in pass rush situations? There's just this dark cloud of linebacker questions hanging over everything else about the Bucs roster as it stands right now. But you take a look across the rest of the roster and the rest of the division, and you have to feel good about where the Bucs are right now and moving into the season. They just have to stay healthy. The health of this team has derailed so many opportunities since that Super Bowl season in 2020. And you go back to that season, they had incredible injury luck and they had incredible COVID luck. You have to remember that there were teams each and every week. This player is out because he tested positive for COVID. This player is out because he tested positive for COVID. Then you have to go through the return process. So some of these guys were missing 2 games. The Bucs didn't really have to deal with that. They didn't have a ton of injuries. And the injuries they did have, they could withstand. But then in 2021, injuries cost them against the Rams in the divisional round. Injuries and off-field stuff cost them in 2022 when the Tom Brady window came to an end. 2023, there were costly injuries and locker room issues with some of these players. And then last year, it was the injuries, especially on defense. They just never stopped. Every single game, I'm tweeting and I'm texting the insiders someone who played a key role, someone who was a starter that was going down and missing time. I was coming on this show every single Friday for the live preview episode talking about this guy's a game time decision. This guy is out. This guy is questionable. And it was key players on the defense. Yes, Mike and Chris missed an entire month. Chris missed the rest of his season. Jalen McMillan was in and out of the lineup with hamstring stuff and other injuries. But it was the defense that got hit the hardest. That's part of the game. And you have to be able to overcome it. Next man up, right? That's the mentality. But that's why what Light and his scouts and the coaching staff did in this draft, that's why it's so crucial. So that if Mike and Chris go down, they're good. When Jamel Dean goes down, they're good. If Antoine or Tyke go down, they're good. There's depth everywhere on this team so that they don't get derailed by injuries like they did last season. They can withstand a guy being out for 4 games. They can withstand Jamel Dean missing, half of a game and then missing the next 2 weeks and then coming back and then leaving with injury again. They can take on all of it. That's why, although some were upset about the Emeka Egbuka pick, that's why it makes so much sense. Because it's not just for this year. It's until 2030. The focus on the corners on day 2, the focus on the defensive front on day 3. It's not just for now. It's so that if Yaya Diaby goes down with an injury, they got people. Anthony Nelson can step in and start, and now all of a sudden David Walker takes on the Anthony Nelson role. Or maybe he takes on the Chris Braswell role and Braswell steps up. They got depth all over the place. The only unanswerable question is, what do they do at linebacker? But that's what I'm going to tackle on the mailbag episode. We are going to dive in to the post mailbag on the next episode, but that's going to do it for this one. If you're not an insider and you have a mailbag question, send them into the DMs on Twitter at Locked On Bucs. Those DMs are open. Send them there. But I do highly recommend becoming an insider. You can do so by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Make sure that you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. And of course, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.